In this practical phase, we are going to explore how to create a pattern. We will play around with the different techniques that we have learned throughout this course. We will use various colors and shapes, gradients, the mesh tool, the eyedropper tool, the color guide, and swatches. We are going to create a pattern and apply it on an item for presentation. Let me show you. We are going to get started by opening a new document, and I'm going to select from the web forms the classic web large format. It's in pixels, landscape, and RGB mode. What I usually do is sketching out my illustrations or my graphics by hand and then taking a quick picture and bringing them in Adobe Illustrator for further editing. I'm going to go ahead and access my desktop where I have this sketch here of the illustration that I want to create. I'm going to drag and drop it within Illustrator and scale it so I can have it as the guide for my illustration. We had a look through what layers do in Adobe Illustrator through this course. They can be really helpful in situations like this. Just lock your layer with your sketch and then create a new layer where you're gonna add the graphics that you're gonna create. I'm gonna go ahead and grab my pen tool, remove the fill, change the stroke to a vivid color where I can actually see it compared to the black here, and start tracing my shapes. I know that the pen tool might be a bit tricky and annoying to use, especially in the beginning since it doesn't feel as natural. A bit of practice and soon you understand how handy it is and how easy it is to create selections with perfect detail. So I'm just tracing the shapes and then we're gonna work further in the composition and recoloring them. The way it works is I'm just using my pen tool to create the shape and always making sure that I'm closing the shape so I can color it easily. Command key to grab the last arrow that I used, which in this case is the white one. Click anywhere outside to deselect the shape and then start the new shape with my pen tool and draw it around. But the more you practice, the quicker you're gonna become. So it's gonna take you just a tiny bit of time to trace this whole image. I'm firstly tracing all the shapes that they are at the very top of the others, and then I'm gonna work on the rest of the shapes underneath, and I'm gonna create a new layer for them so I can kind of have a structure on my file with the different layers and the different shapes. I'm gonna cut the shape, so edit, cut, lock this and add another layer underneath, so graphics 2. Let's go ahead and make all of these strokes a bit thicker so we can actually see them from further. It's really important to be detailed in your work. Make sure that all of the curves are nice and smooth and you trace all of the shapes. And of course, amend them as you are tracing them. They don't have to stick with the initial one because what we created by hand was just a sketch. If you feel comfy starting straight away on your computer, feel free to also do so. It's really up to you to find your own workflow, the one that makes you feel a bit more comfy. Let's have a look on where we are. Some more shapes to go. And then I'm going to create another third layer for the rest of the shapes. I'm going to bring it underneath. I'm going to name also this one number 1 so I can be nice and consistent. This one doesn't really matter, it's going to be behind the other shapes, so I don't really bother to make the curves nice outside the area that is actually visible. Remember to save your work as often as you can. So the shortcut is just Command or Control on Windows and the letter S in your keyboard. Great, so we got all of the shapes. I'm gonna save my file and delete the sketch. I don't need it, it just makes the file heavier with no actual reason. Now I'm gonna start perhaps with the middle layer. I'm gonna turn those shapes to fills instead of strokes and start recoloring them. So I'm gonna use gradients, so let's get started by adding a gradient, a linear one perhaps on this one. As you see, I can't really see the gradient because I applied the stroke instead of the fill. So let's switch that, remove the stroke and go back to the gradient. If you have trouble finding the gradient panel, it's under the window and then gradient. I can now double click on this icon here to switch the color. I love colors and I love working with colors, so for me it's really important to gather some color palettes on my swatches panel and have them ready to access anytime I want. Window and then swatches. From this icon with this three little box, you can go to user defined and see the palettes that you already saved. Let's go with Bright Gradients palette, a palette that I created. I'm gonna grab the folder and drag it on the swatches. You can also use it directly from the libraries if you want to. From the swatches, you'll be able to see that also when you're accessing your gradients. Actually, I'm kind of missing a magenta color, so I'm gonna jump back to my swatches and add the magenta color to my spectrum here. I'm gonna double click on that so I can make it also global. And now I have also the magenta color on my swatches. Yes, that feels a bit more bright and vivid. If you click Edit Gradient, you will get this handle here which allows you to rotate it, move it around, or you can just click and drag it in order to recreate it. I'm gonna grab the next shape and sample it with my eyedropper. The letter I is the shortcut, or here you can find the tool itself, and apply a gradient too. With the G letter, you can access quickly this little handle which allows you to further define your gradient. I'm gonna use the eyedropper tool to sample also this shape here and switch this time to orange and yellow perhaps. G letter, adjusting. So you can see already how quickly you can come up with some interesting colors and gradients just by creating a palette and then placing them on abstract shapes.